Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a lovely weekend and welcome to today's character education session. So today we are starting with our first character trait, which is creativity. So next slide, please, Miley. So what is creativity? A definition is the use of imagination or original ideas to create something. It's also another word would be inventiveness. So when you think of creativity, you might just think of art. Oh, they're a very creative person, they're an artistic person. But creativity is a trait that is required in everything that you do, in any job that you go into, any profession that you go into, even just everyday kind of tasks. It's mainly just problem solving, coming up with an idea, coming up with an original idea, using your imagination for something new. This links directly with one of our HPL characteristics as well, creating and specifically originality. So the definition for this is the ability to conceive something entirely new. So you can see that we're already promoting this in your lessons. It's something that is really, really important. And what we're going to be looking at today is how you can kind of bring this into your life a little bit more and looking at ways that you already do. Okay, next slide, please, Miley. Okay, so in this little video, you can see why creativity is so important. And it's not just something that is important for artists, but why it's important for everybody. So if you can play that video, please, Miley. It might just take a little minute to load. If it doesn't work, I can just give a little summary. So basically, in this little video, they discuss how creativity has gone down since 1990 to now. The creativity being demonstrated has really gone down. And a lot of this is to do with kind of our change in our way of life and how we problem solve and how we have Google at our fingertips and how we can just look up the answer, and we kind of we're not as used to, or we don't need to in some cases, be as creative. So what we need to work on is how can we bring that back, and why it's important to bring that back. So in this video, they also say that CEOs, this was kind of a survey done, I think just in America, but CEOs across really big companies across America said that creativity was the most important trait, something that they saw as the most important trait in their employees. So you can, and this is across a range of fields, so you can see why it is so important and why it's important for us to kind of bring it to the forefront and talk about it and think about it, because it is something that we need. So I will share the link for that afterwards, in case anybody wants to see the little video. Sorry, it wouldn't play. Okay, next slide, please, Miley. So these are 5 steps on how we can be creative. So sometimes we're just creative and we're not really sure of the process that we went through, or sometimes we need to be a little bit more mindful of how I need to be creative here. I need to think of a new idea, but how can I get there? So it's important to know the steps, either reflecting on what you did or knowing what you need to do next. So the first step is preparation. So you have to come up with an idea. So it's really important to research, put yourself into the world of whatever it is that you need to come up with an idea for. So kind of research, consume, immerse, and gather. So gather all of the information, see what's already out there, so that you're informed in making your decision and coming up with your idea. The next one is incubation. So this is really where you put yourself into action. So you've looked at what is everybody else doing, what's all the facts and the information that's already out there. Then incubation is explore, experiment, and synthesize. So this is, if you think about in terms of an artist, if you're doing your preparation stage, you would look up lots of different artists, look at the artwork that's already out there in terms of maybe the theme that you're looking at or the media that you want to explore. Then incubation is where you go and you try that out for yourself. So you might maybe copy one of the artist's work to get a feel for it. You might kind of play around with some of the media and stuff like that. Then illumination. This is where you have that moment of aha, oh, you get inspiration, you're inspired. And this is the part where you hope that this part happens, but you just have to trust the creative process. So illumination, you come up with your idea. And the next step is evaluation. So come up with your idea and then you think, is this actually a good idea? Reflect on it, criticize it, you know, maybe I could change it a little bit in this way. Maybe it would be better if I did this, and then assess, does it actually work? Does it actually work for it to come up with the outcome that I would like? And then implementation. So this is work. So putting that idea into practice. So there's no point in having an idea and not actually utilizing it. So they are the 5 steps of the creative process. Next slide, please, Miley. Okay, so it is really important to note that to be original, it takes inspiration. So you can see that in the definition for creativity, it said that it's coming up with original ideas, and also in the HPL definition as well as coming up with something entirely new. But to be original, it doesn't mean that you don't look elsewhere. It doesn't mean that you don't research. It doesn't mean that you don't take inspiration from others, because you just make life difficult for yourself and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So if you look at artists throughout the ages, or musicians or designers or anybody that is creative, they look to others and they soak up all of that information, and that is how you come up with something new. So if you look at this artwork as an example, so the Mondrian piece on the right, this piece was created in 1910. 5 years before that, the Fauvism movement was very big, and you can see that a Matisse painting on the left was one of a painting from the Fauvism movement. Now, Mondrian was not part of this Fauvism movement, but he was surrounded by it and immersed in it, and he took some elements from that. He was inspired by some aspects and he used them in a different way to create something new. So you can see that he took inspiration from the vivid colors and the simplified forms. They're not exactly the same, the two paintings. His piece is completely new, it is original, but he has taken inspiration from somebody else. So a really quote that I was told a lot of the time throughout my experience in art college was that only the mediocre try to be original. The true genius knows where to plunder. So basically what that means is you don't need to keep trying to make something new. Something new will come from looking to others. Okay, and it actually takes the pressure off a little bit when you just realize, okay, so actually being original isn't this magic thing. There's the steps to it. I can look at other people, I can take inspiration, I can change it around and use it in my own way. Next slide, please, Marlene. So you can see that I've done this here in my piece. So I looked to Mondrian, who had looked to somebody else, so it's just a cycle. And then I took my own photograph. And I drew my own photograph, but I took aspects and inspiration from Mondrian's work. So I took inspiration in terms of the subject matter. It is a painting of flowers. In terms of the color scheme, I took inspiration in terms of that, the really vibrant blue, the reds, but then I twisted it and made it my own to convey the message that I want. So I was kind of looking a little bit more at permanence and how kind of looking at dead flowers and how are they always there and perhaps they're not and they disintegrate and so on. So I took inspiration from what I needed, but then used it in my own way. And that's how I came up with something original. Next slide, please, Miley. So I kind of gave you 5 steps there of the creative process, and I made it sound so easy, and you just follow these steps and you come up with a new idea. But sometimes the creative process looks a bit like this. You have your start, then you have a bit of mayhem, and then you come up with something. And that's okay as well. So sometimes it might feel you have an idea, okay, this is awesome. This is actually not as awesome as I thought. This is actually a little bit more tricky to implement. And then you might get to a step of, oh my God, this is actually terrible. Maybe I'm not able to do this. And then when you push through, actually you think, okay, this might be okay. And then you end with, this is awesome. Okay, so it's kind of coming through that cycle. And that's where a little bit of self-motivation is needed. So if it was just as easy as going through those 5 steps, everybody would be able to be creative all of the time, but it's not an easy thing. So something that you need to practice and something that you need to mentally exercise. But sometimes we get stuck, excuse me, and we get stuck in that bundle in the middle, that step 3 and step 4, where it's just you feel like you can't get through it, and actually you had an idea but it's not working out and it's a terrible idea and maybe you're not able to do this. And when you get stuck there, that's called a creative block. Next slide, please, Marlene. Excuse me. So a creative block or barriers are basically barriers to inspiration. So it's when you get stuck in that, if you remember the step 3 in the creative process where you have that illumination, that inspiration, that where you come up with the idea, when you get stuck there or just before there. So barriers to inspiration can be described as the inability to access one's internal creativity. Next slide, please, Marlene. So why does this happen? Why does this happen to us? And there's several reasons why we might experience a creative block. And some of them are possibly fear of rejection. Maybe we feel actually, and you can see that in that little description there, where it said, this is terrible, I am terrible. So maybe there's a fear of rejection that actually you can't do this, or maybe your ideas won't be received very well. So that's a little bit of maybe lack of confidence. The next one is overworking. Maybe your creativity has been pushed into so many or been overused, and you've been overworked and you're really tired. Perhaps the personal problems, there's other things that are distracting you, maybe anxiety. Another one that I find happens most of the time is the process requires hard work. And, you know, I go into creating my piece and then I'm like, this is actually really difficult to, you know, to actually implement. And that's where I might experience a creative block. Or sometimes I have too many ideas and I don't know which one to go with. Next slide, please, Marlene. Okay, so this is another little video on the how. Just in terms of time, I'm just going to explain the video. I think it's jumped there as well. So in this little video, they describe of how can you get through a creative block, and they really simplify down. And if you look it up online, there is so many ideas and suggestions on how to get through a creative block. And the main one, and the one that I have found from experience, is to just keep going. So pushing through, trusting the process, trusting yourself, motivating yourself and pushing through. If it doesn't work, you can try again, but just keep going instead of the alternative, which is giving up. So what I would like you to do, if you can just go back to the last slide there, Marlene, for 1 sec. So these are some other suggestions on how you might get through a creative block. Physical activity, change the soundtrack. Anytime that I feel I want to be creative, I'm always listening to music. Even if it's not music I'm creating, I just find music is really inspiring. And maybe I'm listening to the same playlist. Change the playlist. Maybe you might find a little bit of inspiration there. Change the environment. If I'm working in the same place, looking at the same things around me, I'm not going to find much inspiration. So change it. Either move rooms or change whatever's being displayed around you, or move your chair so you're looking at something else. Talk about it. This is something that I find so helpful. Talking about what I want to achieve to somebody. Even when I was talking about this presentation today, I spoke to Ms. Gurpreet about it, and just by discussing and having a soundboard, somebody to discuss it with, I came up with kind of one focus, and that's really helpful when you have that too many ideas situation. Rephrase the why, so finding out why you want to do something, and that can be a real motivator. So I find that if I'm creating an art piece, if I'm just creating it for myself, I find it difficult to push through. But if it's something that I've promised somebody else, and I know, okay, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I really want to give it to them, and I want them to be happy with the piece. That's a motivator as well. Or I really want to do well in this project. I want to get the grade, or I want, you know, to get this grade in order to move on to the next step, or whatever. So that making sure that you are aware of why you're doing it. Trusting the process, as I said before. You are able to do this. You know the steps. Don't stop overthinking it and trust the creative process. And the next thing is sometimes all those steps just don't work, and you need to just sleep on it and have a fresh start the next day. Next slide, please, Marlene. So now it's over to you, and obviously we've just got 12 minutes left of this lesson time. So this is something that I want you to work on over the week and share on the Padlet. before next week's lesson. So if you just go to the next slide, please, Miley. So you can see here is our activity menu, and on this slide it has a little description, gives you a little bit more description of the activities. Okay, so you can choose exactly what you want to do and what you feel is most appropriate, and these are ways for you to explore the characteristic of creativity and reflect on the characteristic of creativity. So some of them require for you to work individually, some of them require for you to work as part of a group. So just to take one as an example, so in the first column, discussion column, historical figure, select a historical figure who exemplifies the character trait, discuss this and present this discussion. So whatever way you want to present a discussion, and you can share that on the Padlet. In each column as well, you can see at the bottom, there's an option for you to create your own activity as well. So maybe you've got an idea for a way to explore creativity in a collaborative sense, that's not already listed on the menu. That's absolutely fine. You can do that, come up with your own collaborative activity or creative activity or written activity, whichever, and share it onto the Padlet. So next slide, please, Miley. So you can see on the Padlet here, there is a column for creativity. Please be responsible with your use of the Padlet. Obviously, everything is monitored that goes up now, so nothing will be shared that is not appropriate to what we're exploring. So what you can do is put your name and your class up. If you're working as a group, just put all of your names up. And by the end of our character trait, or sorry, our character education, I want you to explore each of the different colours on that activity menu. So don't be picking the same one week and week again. And the link for the Padlet is there as well. So I will share this activity menu onto your year group Classroom Phoenix group. On there, your Padlet link is already there. So I'll share the activity menu onto the Padlet as well, so you can access that really easily. So you've got 10 minutes left to decide on what you might work on, whether you're working in a group, if you're working in a group, who you're going to work with, and maybe delegate out the tasks and decide on times that you could work on that together, and you can start working on it for the next 10 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed looking and listening about the creative process, the creative block, and I hope that it sparked some ideas and reminded you of scenarios where maybe you were creative or maybe you did experience a creative block. So if there's any questions from any of the form tutors, please pop them into the chat, or you can also send me a message. I'll just stay for a little minute. Morning, guys. Thank you for the messages. Okay, so I'll leave you go. I will share that menu now onto the Padlet. The Padlet link, as I said, is on your Classroom Phoenix group. I'm really excited to see the activities that come from this creative project. They don't have to be huge projects. It can just be a 5-minute little discussion and then document that onto the Padlet. Or you might want to do something a little bit bigger, make a documentary, make a podcast, whatever you would like to do. Okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. And thank you for your time.